So how do you tackle contamination OCD in children in five, easy-ish steps? I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easy-ish. I'm Julie and I'm a mum of a daughter who was diagnosed with contamination OCD when she was 14. And what followed were 4 to 5 tough years of exposure response therapy to try and help her lead a more normal life. So what are the 5 steps that work for us? Step 1 is to come up with a plan. With us, we actually sat in a coffee shop. We had a huge piece of cardboard paper, coloured pens, and we just wrote every single item of contamination OCD issues that we wanted to tackle, and we just blitzed it and put on a big huge cardboard piece of card. Step 2, we then decided which of those areas we wanted to tackle first. Now, a good way of identifying the one to start with is to get your child to score each sort of item that they want to address out of 10, with 10 being the most anxious, 1 being the least anxious. And the best place to start then is to start with the one that they find easier. I say easier because they'll find them all difficult, but there will be one area that you'll be able to nudge them to start with. Alright, so that's step 1 is to actually blitz it all and write everything you want to address regarding contamination OCD. Step 2 then is to actually score it out of 10 and decide on the one you're going to start with. Step 3 is to actually then start a new sheet of paper or card, put that as a title, the first one you're going to address, and then to break it up into tiny steps. Because what you'll find is getting your child on board to actually tackle the contamination OCD is often the hardest part. And you'll find that once you've got them on board and they've got into some sort of momentum, the ones that were like scoring a high 10, by the time you get to them, aren't as difficult as they would have been at the beginning, because it's like sort of, I always think of it as like unraveling knitting, that the first few stitches are the hardest, aren't they, to tug at, and then once you start getting momentum, it comes a lot easier. And it's very similar with contamination OCD. So then, as I say, put that as a title of the one and then break it into smaller steps. So how would you break it into smaller steps? Well, for example, let's just say that your child is washing their hands 10 times in an hour. I'm just going to pick something simple. You would just agree that if they did it 9 times in an hour, that would be the first step. Now, it might mean that it would take the whole week for you to actually get them to even reduce it to 9 in a whole week. It might be that they're making really good progress and you could get them to do it by 8 times by the end of the week. But agree a time frame. A week is usually a good one to start with. And then agree what you want to reduce it down to. My advice would be to keep it simple, especially at the beginning. Otherwise, they'll just switch off. So as I said, as an example, if they're washing it 10 times in a day, say, right, if you wash it 9 times in a day, that'll be your first thing. Because what you're doing is conditioning their mind to realise that they've got to make some changes, but they realise they've got a whole week to get their head around it. Okay, so that's step 3. Step 4, rewards work really, really well. Trust me, I didn't want to introduce rewards. I was dead against them because I thought, well, really, you're sort of rewarding and spending money out just to get somebody to try and get better, but they do work, especially with children. Now, the rewards don't have to be massive. I mean, with me, sometimes it could be something small I could offer, like a coffee or a trip to the coast or a meal or a movie night. You decide what's within your budget and what's likely to trigger your child to want to get on board, and just agree the rewards. But what I would say is that once they reach the reward, where they were aiming to achieve, get another reward in place as well, as to say, right, congratulations, you've done it each day and now you've reached that X, Y or Z. Agree a landmark of when you're going to give a bigger reward and make sure you keep to it. All right, so step 1 is to blitz everything, every single issue they have around contamination OCD. Step 2 is decide which one you're going to actually start with. And the best way of doing this is to score it out of 10 and choose the one. Step 3 is to then put the one you're going to tackle first as a title and break it into small steps. Step 4 is to agree a reward and get them to actually draw a picture of the reward by the list that you've got on there. So you're all agreeing on what exactly it is you're going to be, doing if they actually achieve that milestone. And step 5 is to stay consistent to the plan. There will be times when your child will not want to do therapy, But if you really can't get them to do it, don't push it, because like most other mental health illnesses, OCD is a very dangerous illness in that it can lead to suicidal thoughts or even attempts. So my advice would be to try and push it safely within a means you feel safe to do. But if they are adamant they're not going to do it, then agree a trade-off. Either agree a different reward to see if that will motivate them to still do the therapy you've agreed, or if that fails, then do a trade-off. What do I mean by trade-off? Just for example, in the analogy we just used, if they want to actually reduce the hand washing, either get them to practice run as if they're going to do it, so that in their head they're practicing it. Or it could even be, well, I tell you what, if you still need to do 10 washes in an hour, then you've got to count 5. You've got to feel uncomfortable for 5 seconds before you wash your hands each time. There are always ways you can break it down even further, but always agree a trade-off, because it's keeping them consistent to therapy so they're not losing their momentum. One thing I would say as well, obviously I only ever recommend doing these sort of techniques with sort of backup of professional medical advice, and very often it will require medication as well. I can understand what the waiting list must be like now for mental health issues, so if you can't get to see a specialist, then certainly go and discuss it with a GP and see whether they can advise you on medication and ways of keeping the child's anxiety down so that you can do this safely. Alright, so that's my 5 steps on tackling contamination OCD in children. Hope it's helped. Just want to do a quick plug for 2 books I've written, 2 children's books, because from my own experience of dealing with child OCD, there were probably signs that were showing way before my daughter got diagnosed. So what I'm trying to do is target 5 to 8-year-olds within my books, and to try and get them to speak up to the voices, because my first one is Hank the Hungry Monster, and that's what I call OCD, because he was like a hungry monster and never got full. The more you fed it, the more commands it came up with. So in this one, I teach children, first of all, the consequences of mean behaviour, because in the story here, Annabelle starts to develop OCD because one of her peers has been mean to her. So I show the importance of kindness and how actions and words can have severe consequences. I also show the importance of confiding in others. In this instance, Annabelle confides in her teacher. And thirdly, in this book, I actually help children to speak up to OCD thoughts and voices. And then in my follow-up book, I introduce Trixie the Treat Monster, who takes on Hank OCD. And what she does is actually shows how powerful distraction techniques and rewards can be in tackling a child OCD. All right, I hope that's helped. As I say, I actually provide signed copies of my books on my website. My website is www.themindmonsters.co.uk. I've also got loads of freebies on there with free advice on how to help children with anxiety and OCD. And my books are also available to purchase on Amazon, Waterstones, Book Depository, and most other leading bookstores. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.